Okay X, or whatever creepy board this makes its way onto. I put it here because I thought it'd get the most people to whom it was relevant. If you're one of those people who are inherently drawn to horror, you're in real danger. I don't know what it is exactly, I don't pretend to know everything that's going on. And in fact, I, myself, used to be drawn to the more realistic, non-supernatural creepypastas. But, well, let me explain. About a year ago, I was up at 3 in the morning. You know, that part of the night where you're so deep into it, it feels like it will never end. Anyway, I was up clicking around, looking for a good creepypasta I hadn't read before, really getting myself freaked out. You know the feeling? I'm sure you like the feeling, that's the problem. Anyway, I'm reading and I hear a pattering sound coming from the kitchen. I had a cat, so I just assumed it was her. But then I glance on my bed, and my cat is there. Now I've been freaking myself out for a while here, so I was nearly trembling with fear as I opened my bedroom door. I live alone in a single bedroom apartment, with just a bedroom, a kitchen, a living room, and a bathroom. My bedroom door opens onto the kitchen. It was pitch black, the moonlight gleaming off the linoleum. I strained my ears and listened. I heard nothing. I admonished myself for being such a fucking pussy. It was just random house noises, right? Or maybe a fucking mouse in the walls. I was about to turn around and head back into my room when I heard it again, and I saw something scatter across the linoleum in the kitchen, heading for the bathroom. It was small, but it was definitely not a rat. The limbs were way too long. The torso was far too high off the ground. And the way it moved quickly, but so awkwardly. In any other circumstance, I might have laughed at it. As it was, I was scared shitless. So, you know, I basically freeze for like 10 minutes. It was the size of the thing that convinced me not to move. No matter how weird or fucked up it was so much smaller than me. It couldn't have been that dangerous, right? So I pop open the bathroom door. Before I turn the light, I do a quick scan. Nothing. I flick the switch. I look around. Still nothing. I look on the ceiling even. I throw the shower curtain open. Nothing still. What could it have been? My mind started inventing explanations. It definitely had 4 limbs. Maybe it was a big-ass spider who had lost 4 of its legs somehow. That could explain the awkward movement. It was good enough for me. I was about to go back to bed when I thought, on a whim, to use my broom to poke behind the toilet, between the wall and the base of the seat. When I did, I hit something solid, and it scurried out. It looked like a tiny human. It was pale white, pale as a maggot, with dirty grey streaks running along its skin. It moved on all 4s, with long, thin fingers that grasped the ground. Its skull was completely bald, and it had no eyes, and the skin looked like it had been torn away from the lower half of its face, leaving the exposed teeth and gums. It looked up at me, well, pointed its face in my general direction anyway, and then scurried quick as fuck up the side of the bath and down into the drain. It moved in quick bursts, like a spider, and climbed straight up smooth surfaces like one too. After it disappeared down the drain, I just stood there, frozen, broom handle still in my hand, for a good 5 minutes. I was scared shitless. I slowly backed out the bathroom and closed the door, and then stuffed a blanket in the crack between the floor and the door, fearing that it might come out. Then I sat in my bed and wondered what I could do. I mean, it wasn't like I could call the police, or even tell any of my friends. It's not like they'd believe me. So, what did I do? I made a thread on X. This was quite a while ago, almost a year. You might even remember it. It wasn't anything special, and it didn't even get that many responses before falling off the boards. I guess people thought I was just joking, which really, I would have thought the same thing. My thread, in retrospect, sounds exactly like the type of threads I hate. But Besides from all the OP as a fag and sage responses, there was one other one. I've seen them too, man. Email me. Along with an email address that I'm not going to give out here. So I emailed this kid, right? Right away he responds and we start up a conversation in IRC. He introduces himself as John and basically tells me a very similar story. One night a few months ago, reading Creepypasta, heard a noise, got up, saw a small pale man. His was a bit bigger, he said. It was the size of a cat. But he also told me one other thing, that I'd be seeing more of them. He said that ever since he saw the first one, he's been seeing more and more of them, out everywhere, even in the street during the day. They were everywhere, he said, and once you noticed the first one, it got a lot easier to see all the other ones. He had no idea what they were, and he hadn't figured out their behaviour yet. He said that usually when he saw them or heard them in his own house, he was reading creepypastas. So they usually freaked him out something awful, but he said again, he had never actually seen them do anything terrible, just scurry out of sight. But he said some got pretty big, and not all of them looked exactly the same. I still didn't sleep that night, but over the next week, and those that followed, I found that I did get used to them. I did see more of them. I'd glimpse them out of the corner of my eye, or see the retreating rear end of one crawling into a gutter pipe, or see their tiny faces staring out at the street from the sewers. Some, it seemed, weren't even trying to hide. I live in Providence, Rhode Island, which is a small city. On my way to work one day, I take the bus. I was looking out the window and saw a pretty large one, as large as a medium-sized dog, trotting along the sidewalk. People were just walking by it. Actually, I think a lot of people saw it as a dog. One man stopped to scratch its head. I'd always email John and tell him about the appearances I saw. I even tried to catch some on camera, but they always heard the mechanical whirring and darted away before my camera could take a picture. I told myself I'd have to take a picture of one of the bigger, slower ones. But either way, as the weeks wore on, I became more and more used to them. Sure, they were creepy as shit, and I could never sit down on the toilet and enjoy a long crap anymore, because I was paranoid as fuck they'd climb up into the bowl and bite me on the arsehole. But they weren't really doing anything harmful. They unnerved the fuck out of me, but so did big spiders. I could live with them. John called them Gristers, because he said they reminded him of the Grister meme on X for some reason. I'm pretty sure he meant the Grifter meme, but the name Grister stuck. I continued my exchanges with John, but I noticed that he was becoming more and more tense. It was hard to tell over the text, but really that was the only way to put it. I just figured that once the novelty of a shared experience had worn off, he didn't really have much to talk about. John wasn't really my type. He was a steroid-pumping bodybuilder in southern Florida who lived with his mother. But we started discussing Grister behaviour, and he said his was starting to act a bit more differently than the ones I saw. He'd wake up at night and they'd be perched at the end of his bed, staring at him with their eyeless faces. They wouldn't scurry away anymore. He said he woke up one time because one of them actually started touching his face. That seemed unnerving. This whole time I'd been putting out inquiries on the internet to see if anyone else had experienced this phenomenon. I couldn't be the only one, but no one came forward. On X, most of my threads about the subject got saged, so eventually I stopped asking. But I have an inquisitive mind. I wanted to know what these things did and what exactly they were. I even wanted to capture one. I left out food and mouse traps, but none of these things ever went for it. My cat would notice them though. She'd hiss at them and even chase them a couple of times. All those times I had seen her do that and assumed she was being a dumbass cat, chasing at nothing. One night, I was walking home from work alone. I work at a call centre for a police charity, and my house is about 6 miles away. I'd had to stay late, so there was no bus to come pick me up. And I didn't really have all that many friends, so I had to walk. Anyway, I was walking past some old abandoned brick houses, creepy shit let me tell you, when I heard some weird low groan. That's when I happened to notice that there were a lot more Gristers than usual here. They were mostly ignoring me, but they were scurrying in and around one particular brick house. The groaning sound seemed to be coming from the alley beside it. Now, a lot of Gristers were creepy enough, even without that low groaning noise. What made me decide to investigate? I don't know. Morbid curiosity? I'm always looking for some creepy/gore stuff to post on the boards. I thought that maybe the groaning was some kind of wounded animal. So I approached the side of the house, noticed that the windows were boarded up. The groaning? I should have known then, it was no animal. It was a low, creaking, gurgling sound. It didn't sound like any fucking animal I knew. So I snuck down the alley, and when I saw what was making the noise, I nearly pissed myself. It was a fat, humongous Grister, at least 8 feet wide, completely unable to move, with rolls of fat hanging down over its leg. It had no neck, just 14 chins leading up to its macabre exposed jaw. Dirty drool ran down its chin to cover its obscenely huge belly. Smaller Gristers crawled in and out of the rolls of its fat. It rubbed itself with a pudgy claw, making the groaning, gurgling sound, which seemed almost sexual. It was terrible. I know it doesn't sound like it, and objectively, I can think that a fat, cooing Grister rubbing itself might sound pretty funny, actually. But in the presence of the thing, all I felt was a sick revulsion and disgust. But I kept in mind one thing, that I had been looking for a picture of these things. So I busted out my camera phone and snapped a picture. I wish I hadn't. If I hadn't, I think maybe I could have lasted a little longer. The minute I snapped the picture, the thing stopped groaning and swiveled its head towards me. All the Gristers did, in fact. They all started hissing and screaming at me, a horrible fucking sound like rusty nails on a chalkboard. I was thoroughly freaked out. To put things mildly, I lost my shit. I ran out of there as fast as I could, ran all the way home. Gristers didn't seem so harmless to me now. That noise they had made was straight out of hell. I didn't feel safe with the lights off anymore. I flipped all the lights on, scaring the shit out of my napping cat. I slammed the bathroom door shut and stuffed a blanket around the cracks again. Then I sat down on my bed and looked at the picture I'd taken. There it was, clear as day, that huge Grister. Just looking at it made me feel sick. Of course I was going to post it on X. I loaded it on my computer and sent an email to John with the subject, "Will you look at this fat fuck?" Then I immediately came to X and began typing up my thread. Explaining myself, explaining the Gristers, explaining the photograph. I was just getting ready to post when John sent me a message. "Yo, don't show that shit to anyone." I stopped. I replied to John, asking him what he was talking about. He told me, he said that he thought he had figured out what was making the Gristers around him more hostile. He said that he thought that when they figured out that you could see them, they started getting more aggressive. He showed me scratches he had all down his arm from the clawing at him at night. He said that he'd seen a lot more of the bigger ones hanging around his house at night. They watched him through his windows. They knew he could see them. And they didn't like it. And now, I was pretty sure they knew I could see them too. So what did I do? In the end, I didn't post the picture. I wasn't too intimidated, but it probably saved a lot of you. I didn't want to trigger anyone else into being able to see these guys if it had dangerous consequences down the road. Thank you everyone for watching. That's it for part 1. I'm doing this in 2 parts as I want to not have a longish video for when I'm starting off. So yeah, I hope you're looking forward to part 2 as much as I am, because this is one of my favourite creepypastas and I'm really happy to be reading this. So yeah, Anyway, goodbye.